Hello everyone, it's Jack from Visual Effects. So today we're going to be looking at how to create a beach using our new beach collection in our new subs library. So there's not much stuff in there at the moment, but obviously as we collect more things, it will be added. So I've quickly added the beach sand and the pebble floor and then these 5 assets. So when we get into our scene, we'll just see that we set up a new Octane scene. So as you can see, the assets are now imported into Cinema 4D, ready for creating the scene. So for now, because these are just nice detail pieces, we'll just turn these off and just focus on getting our sand right. So for that, we just want to create a plane, and we want to create a figure as well. We will actually keep those on just for now, temporarily, whilst we just get the scale of the beach. So we kind of want to make it quite big. We'll call this sand. We'll knock the poly count up in a bit. We'll just create this, call it C. And put that there for now. So we've got 2 planes. So we'll make this a bit more detailed. So what we'll do is we'll just go to our displacer within Cinema 4D, put it under sand. Then we'll turn on our lines so we can see what we're doing. Make it 100 by 100 for now. And then under shader, we want to go to gradient. And to check it's working, we want to push that that way. And as you can see, it's going the wrong way. So we just want to switch that so that it's falling into the sea. So just swap sides. Like so. Cool. And then we only want that slight slope towards the water at the very end, so we'll just pull that forward like so. And then what we'll do as well is add a bit of turbulence so it creates a bit of variation. We don't want it to be too lumpy because it's sand, but enough detail to make it look a bit more realistic. And then what you'll notice is we get these. So what we just want to do is we want to put 104 and 104, and then that's got rid of all that horribleness from the edges. And we'll reduce that height now we know what we're doing. We'll lose this just for a bit. So now we've got a slight slope incline. Might want to keep adjusting it until you get something that you're a bit more happy with. A bit more turbulence maybe. Yeah, something like that. And then we will go in and just double check this and probably just raise this to 200 maybe. Just for a bit more variation and a bit more detail. Cool. So the displacement will work up this bit. So this is just mainly just for a nice weird sea line. So this will all be displaced with displacement textures, so you don't have to worry about that too much. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to drop the sand texture onto the beach. And scale it up like crazy. Just going to look up from bird's eye view to make sure that they've got a decent seamless texture. We can keep adjusting this in a bit, but for now let's leave it at something like that. We'll get our water texture as well, our bog standard water texture, and just drop that onto there as well now, so we've got something that will start to look semi-decent in the renderer. So now we want to kind of try and place these in a nice composition. So these are some assets that were scanned during a trip to Wales and quite useful. The only thing that with these that has got a little quirk is that these require 2 textures, and as you can see, you can use the texture tag selections for each texture here. So if you're struggling with that, if for whatever reason you haven't got these as empty textures when you import the models, that's all you need to do. Drag the selection into this box here. So let's shape this up Again, this is just playing until we get something that we're happy with. Blend these together a bit better. And then to start filling in some gaps as well, what you can do is you can just create an instance of any of these so it doesn't add to the render time. So we can just block out more, get more shape, and even change the direction of which it's going to just kind of add extra variation. So it's just not the same. So that looks pretty cool. What you could do as well is, which you might explore, which isn't in the render, maybe putting some like foliage at the top to make this seam line a bit neater, because it is just a sign of a cliff scan. Just to create a little mini wraparound, we will do the same with this. Another render instance, turn it round and curve it in a little bit. Do want some of them boulders at the bottom, not too much. Cool. So then the next thing to do will be to try and frame up our shot. So we want that kind of being in the side, so somewhere like that maybe. We want to create an Octane camera and a HDR environment for now. So with the Octane camera, we'll change this probably to a 50mm lens. Pull out a little bit until we get that real edge of that cliff. Get something that looks neat like this. This can probably be tucked in there. And then we will potentially add a bit of foreground interest by duplicating this. And pulling it towards us. Cool. So now if we just jump into our live view, see what we've got. That's looking quite cool. Just make sure that that's rendering. Just want to tuck that down just a little bit. And maybe push that down just a tad. Brilliant. So as you can see, our sand texture looks a bit pants, but that's because we've got no light. So let's just get that sorted now. Import a HDR. It's got our HDR imported, and we just want to spin it around until we get something that we are happy with. We'll play with that for now. So as we can see, the sand texture requires a little bit more effort, so let's have a look at what's going on. So it's probably a little bit too big, so we can just jump in and make it slightly smaller. We're quite happy with this sand texture because it's been hard to try and get a really good sand texture over the years. But this one looks quite realistic how the light hits it as well, so we're quite happy. And we can probably crank the displacement up to just a little bit. So if we just inspect that now. You shouldn't really ever need to go any higher than 4K unless you're delivering in a format that's higher than 4K resolution. Yeah, that should be okay for us. Okay, so that should look a bit more patterny. So okay, so that looks good. So with the roughness, we've cranked the roughness of the beach sand to 8. So the next thing we want to do is get our sand and copy and paste it. Just to add a bit more variation, we're going to add some pebbles. So we have got this pebble texture, also from the beach collection, and it's a real simple texture again, just an albedo, roughness, normal and displacement. We're not even using the others because we want to control the specular ourselves. So if we just drop that onto the sand and rise it up just a little bit. Okay, that was too much, but let's go in again, inspect from bird's eye view to make sure that we're getting a good ratio and not stretching the bricks too much. So we're going to want a little bit more displacement for this scene, so if we just crank that up a little bit. Doesn't matter if it's exaggerating a little bit because it's not a pebble beach. So if we just pull out again and then just push that down just a little and just let the odd few poke up. Yeah, we'll go with something like that. So now that's kind of eliminated the repetition a little bit. The next thing to do is to start to use some of the other assets. So we've got over there, we want it close to our camera because it's pointless putting this much detail in far away. So we've got the beach pebbles and the other one too, beach pebbles too. Bring that over and we'll play with the forest boulder too. Where's that camera? Ah, cool. Let's bring this over, bring this over. So just want to plonk this down, blend it in with the floor. Again, we'll scale it up just a little bit. These was quite big pebbles if I remember right. Probably scale up a little bit more. Bury it in the sand. Perfect. And the same with this one. Placement of these is just what will end up making the scene look a lot more realistic. If you just put it in there randomly, it's just going to look terrible. So again, what we can do is we can create another render instance of these pebbles. Throw some over there too. And spin it around so it's not the same. And then just one more, just to break it up a little bit, a render instance of these beach pebbles at the foreground. Just so it looks like we've got a few more rocks here, right by where this is. Probably should have a few more over there as well actually. Holding control when dragging from another object will create another object and make sure it's got render instance. Cool. That's really good distribution now. So what do we want to do next? We want that floating forest boulder to come down. And we've got a little trick with this one because it was a forest scan. It was quite big in real life, so let's just scale it up a little bit. And we kind of want it to lean towards there. Another little trick is you can lock your camera, so if you do that you can keep jumping out and moving them about. I wish I'd done that to be honest, but it doesn't matter, I got it in the right place. So then what we want to do as well is we also want to duplicate that, so we'll have another render instance of this. Whatever we do to the one, it'll change on all of them, so that's another good thing of using render instances. Kind of want to create variation. So what I want to do with this now, this forest boulder, is just jump back into here and let's pick a nice shot so we can see what we're doing. So we're just going to jump into the forest boulder texture, which if you've got a lot more textures, say if you're doing a bigger scene and a more complex scene, you can just press this button here, boop, and it'll highlight it for you so we know which one it is. I've pre-set up this, so this obviously because we've got all the textures in, but I've set this up with a mixed texture. One, to make sure I remember to do it, and two, to demonstrate what we're going to do. So apologies for moving of windows, it's just so that we can see everything. And all I want to do now is I just want to go jump in our beach sand, get our albedo, copy, jump into the boulder again and paste our sand. Okay, so now if I put this into mix texture, we can see if we flick between the amount of 1, which is all this, so the scan data, and if we go to 0, it's going to our sand texture, which is here. What I like to do first is I like to get this so it's looking semi-decent before we start distributing the sand. So we just want to go into our UV transform and scale it up. There's a slight variation. Probably going to need a slight color correction. Cool, so a slight variation there actually will make it brighter. Oish. And there we can work on the distribution. So we're just going to use dirt, drop that into the mix texture. We're going to set the strength to 10. It's going to differ for each scene, probably the details to 3, and then let's play with the radius. So what's happening, you can see, is we're adding sand to this model, so in the crevices. So if we just store render buffer and then increase the radius, you can see we're just getting a little bit of sand in the crevices. Might make that a bit bigger. I don't want to go too crazy because we want a bit more of the variation, but we do want to make it look like it blends in with the environment. So somewhere like that is quite cool. The next thing to do, although it actually doesn't look too bad, but we'll just demonstrate it anyway, is these rocks look blue. So we want to kind of blend them in as if they're part of this scene more. So although you can get rocks that look more blue than the sand, we kind of want to blend them just a little bit. So let's have a look. So again, we'll just jump into these. So that's our beach pebbles. Open the node editor. Got a color correction ready set up. And let's just play. You can crank the saturation if you're getting a bit confused too with which way the colors are going. So kind of want them to be warmer, but not too warm. Yeah, I want them in that direction. So somewhere there. Pull saturation down. In fact, we will just copy this color correction and do exactly the same on the other ones. So delete that color correction, paste, cool. So it's kind of took a little bit of life out of the scene, so we will probably introduce a bit of variation back. So let's, again, we could blend it with the sand, but I'm not too bothered about it actually, because it just looks like it's covering some of them, but that might help the situation. Let's just try it. So we're just going to create a dirt node. Actually no, we'll copy from the boulder. So if we just go, we want these nodes, copy, and we want to paste. Just want to blend that with that and blend that with the albedo. So now what we've done is we've just pinched stuff that we've done to our boulder and just put it on these so that they're blending a bit better with the sandy ground. Wrong asset. Yeah, see, it's just to demonstrate what's happened. Without the dirt distribution and then with the dirt distribution, it looks a lot better. Looks like it's blending in a bit more. So let's go back to our camera. And this is where we get to choose what our height of our water is, because we can't really see it now, and when that becomes a sky it'll just look a bit naff. So we're going to just raise up the sea level a little bit. Again, we should probably go and check the texture as well, see if it's okay. Yeah, that looks okay. Bring it in a little bit. Quite like creating these pools. How's that look? It's a bit nicer. Could probably do with a bit more height. If we'd like to add a few waves as well, which we do, we're going to just jump into our sand, copy the displacer and put it onto the sea. And under shader, we'll just change it to Cinema 4D's got a brilliant one, and it's in surfaces and water. So because we were having the displacer now, we're going to need more segments. So let's crank that to 200 and 200. So there's a bit more variation. There's some waves happening, and that is, we will now need to change this to 100 and 100. So we don't want them to be quite that high, but we'll make them high for now, just whilst we sort the mapping out. So just jump in your water texture, make the waves the right kind of size, and then we'll just lower them. So if we go to 30, we've got a bit of variation here, here and here, which is better than just having it quite flat. Okay, and then the annoying thing is we're probably going to have to make this huge so it fills the horizon. We're still happy with that texture? Yep. And then before we jump back onto just perfecting some little extra details, what we want to do as well is we want to duplicate the sea. Annoying, sorry. Remove that displacer for now. And we can kind of put any texture on that we wanted to be under the sea. So I'm just going to go for pebbles. Doesn't necessarily matter if this is accurate or not. Not like that. And I generally sometimes, just as a cheat, unless I'm going to do the same sort of displacement as the beach, just do it so that it's a gradual decline down. But not so that we see it in our scene. So I guess next up is we want to get our render settings looking good. So let's jump into here. We'll change it to path tracing. These do not need to be this high. Want adaptive sampling on because we might use the volume in a bit. When it's kicking earlier and just a little bit later on that one. And that should be it for now. We'll turn off alpha channel so that we don't get confused by the background, so we know exactly what's happening up here. Oh, I hate this line. If you get this line, what you have to do is you just need to make sure that you have got keep environment ticked off. So now we just want to jump into our water and just slightly tweak it so it blends in a little bit. So we've got a dirt node already set up but no settings changed. So we just want to knock the radius up a little. So now we've just got a little bit more of a little blend. If you feed it into the reflection as well, what you'll find is it'll hopefully deaden it a little bit. Kind of don't necessarily want it to be that frothy, so we'll just go to a value of about 10. So it just creates a bit of separation from a far render. Obviously it's not very detailed, but you could add a noise as well to add a bit more detail, but as it's just a background element for us, just that dirt will probably give us enough separation. So as far as I'm concerned, I mean, this looks a bit too bright, so we could probably just do a lazy drop of about 8.8. So you just want to match these values a little bit closer, so they're a bit more realistic. So the only thing I'm not liking about this now really is we need to just cover this because it's not great. So there's lots of ways we could do that. We could create our own little mountain, we could create there's millions of ways, but what we'll do is we'll use another trusted website, Quixel, and we'll use their bridge. So all 3D assets and 3D models all going hand in hand. Doesn't matter where you get them from. We obviously want you to get ours because they're quite cool, and the library is getting bigger and bigger, slower than Quixel, but equally just another place to go is to get slightly different renders to everyone else. So if we go to our bridge and we just get some little plants maybe, so if we just go to home, 3D plants, something quite big to just cover that the lazy way. There we go. It was in Wales, so that would be acceptable. So if we just download a 2K res, and we'll get these ones too. What we need to do as well, actually, whilst remember, is jump into your render settings and make sure you've set this to Octane render. Otherwise, when you send stuff from Bridge, it'll send it in Cinema 4D materials, which no one uses anymore. So if we just send that to our scene, you could add grass as well and wild grass up on that line. So if we just send these, this is where it gets really cool. You could use a scatter and scatter it across the cliff face, but we quite like that, so we're not going to hide too much of it. It's just mainly the top to make it feel a bit more realistic than just randomly chopped, because obviously we didn't have an helicopter for this one, or a drone, so we'll just plonk some of these. You can also hide some of the vegetation that doesn't obviously come out very well on scans with plants, so we'll do that as well at the end. So if we just put that as if it's coming out of the mountain a little bit. Cliff, not mountain. Just turn the render off for now whilst we're just scattering assets. Not to risk the good old Octane crashing. So this is the bit that I really want to cover. Let's do that. This can make or break your renders. It looks like you might be able to just get realistic assets and then just drop them anywhere. But it does require a bit more thought. So we will plonk that on where I mentioned that these bad parts of the scans come out. Grass textures never really work either. Need to angle it a little bit. You can use bend modifiers and stuff to like manipulate the plants a little bit as well, but because they're quite small, let's just assume that they grow quite straight. Don't necessarily need all of these. We'll probably put one on each side just to add a little bit of colour pop. And probably shrink them as well so they look like different plants. And they can go over to the left. So if we just look at that in the render engine now, see what's happening. We need to cover that. Looks okay. So let's just lock the camera off again and let's jump in and tweak. So this looks a bit too high here. Again, too high. Now we're going to create a render instance. Put that there-ish and rotate it subtly. And then we want to rotate this again. Another render instance. And one more render instance. So you've got a little bit of plantage, which looks quite cool there. Just to make it look fair, we could potentially bring one of those over to the other side. Could even add some on our rock if we wanted to. Like I said, you can scatter as well if you wanted it a bit more coverage and a bit more random, but we kind of want the control because it's quite a simple scene, to be fair. This is all with no reference as well. If you've got reference, then you'll get something that looks even more realistic. But this was just a way of showcasing our new beach assets and showing you what you can do with them in conjunction with another library like Quixel. Just want to hide that twig. That's cool, it's hidden. Back into the camera. That looks good. What we'll do as well is we'll just make sure that we're happy with the lighting, see if it's the best that we can get out of this HDR map. And if it is, we'll roll with it. So we want it to be a bit brighter, 3 maybe. 1.2. And let's just roll with this, see what we get. It's amazing how different to see looks. It's quite happy with what we first had, to be fair, so let's go back to that. So the only thing not doing it for me now, the water, and obviously we could do some stuff here, like more pebbles or more rocks or even plants, but we'll leave it for this tutorial, I think. So let's just sort that water out. Pebble floor. Pays to stay organised as well, so let's just, whilst we think about it, get all the Quixel stuff into one place. Create another folder with the cameras and lighting for scene, and let's drop all these, and let's just drop all these assets into here. And we'll put visual effects at scans. So we've actually, in this scene, literally just built the beach, sand, and the water, and that's the only CG part really. Everything else is scanned. So that's pretty cool. So if we just want to just double check that that's actually adding to this, and just make sure that it doesn't look better with sand. I suppose it does actually. Just make sure we've got decent reflections. It's always a good way to see as well. Is just face something that's going to reflect into the water, as to see if it's going to look good or not, because that looks terrible. That's not right. Yeah, so let's tweak our water a little bit. Don't advise messing with the index value, but sometimes it can help you create fake reflection. And have slightly bigger waves to break up the reflection. Okay, so that's looking a lot better now. Yeah, we just crank that value to somewhere between, so you can just see a slight variation on that edge. Yeah, around about 35. There we go, we got it back and we got a decent reflection, so it looks more realistic. Perfect. The last thing I would like to do in Cinema 4D is jump into our camera. The image doesn't necessarily need to be on because we've actually got quite nice highlight control, but I like to jump into where it says thin lens, change it to universal, change the focal length to about 3, see what that does. Nothing, great. So if we just change it to about 1.8 maybe. Focus over there. Under depth of field, I like to create a more retro feel, so I'll go somewhere like 2 for the aspect ratio for anamorphic. Aperture edge, make it really sharp, and make the central obstruction a little bit, so it's more of a vintage lens. And then final little bit is barrel distortion on the edges, maybe just a little bit of distortion. We don't want that much depth of field. Let's change that to 3 again. Focus on this boulder here, so it's just got that blurred subtly in the background. And just tweak some of the bloom settings. Give us a little bit of a more magical feel. Now, happy with all the settings, we want to just create a VDB volume, so we'll click up here. We'll go to our haze product and we will jump it up in size, maybe bigger than that. Turn the camera off for now. If you're struggling to see volumes, Octane's a bit clunky, so you might have to just crank the density lower the step length and send to render button. You may need to hit this several times. Cool, so that is our volume. So this is just our 3D haze. So we just want to make that bigger. Cover our scene. Go a bit higher so it looks like it touches the clouds. You can pick where you want the gap of this volume to be as well. We want that to be quite close to our camera. Let's jump back in. You can't see a thing, which is good. Let's jump back into our volume. Change the step length to about 5 and the density to about 20 for now. And then just play with it until you get something a little bit more mysterious. These wisps look cool, but not for this scene, so let's just hide them. 0.5. And 15. 0.25. There we go. So it's just catching in this light here, and it looks a bit more mysterious and nice. Right, final step in Cinema 4D, render settings, and we will do a nice full HD render. EXR RLE, because that is one of the faster when jumping in After Effects. People use DWAA, but it actually doesn't retain highlights as much, and also because it's so compressed, the computer struggles to handle it. So what we'll do is we'll go to render AOVs. We want post-processing. Want to save the beauty. I like to do AO pass. What else do we like to do? Reflection and transmission. Oh yeah, and a volume pass. So if we just go to AO settings as well, we want to create alpha shadows and we want bump mapping on. Simples. Then we just want to pick where we're going to save it. And then just hit render. So next is the After Effects part. So let's just get our EXR that we've imported, drop it into a new comp. And let's look for extractor. Ugh, wrong screen. What we're going to do is we want to duplicate this a few times. In the bottom one, we want to go and pick beauty. Next one up, we want to pick ambient occlusion. So if when you import your ambient occlusion map, it looks like this. You just need to change everything to a Y. And remember, why would you do this? So that is the ambient occlusion, and then we want the next one to be transmission, the next one to be volume, and then the final one to be post-processing. Won't necessarily use the reflection this time. Okay, so we've got this. So what we want to do is we just want to see our beauty at the bottom. Whoa, nice. And you probably want to import a sky. So once you've imported your sky, just drop it in the back, underneath everything. That looks okay, but can we get something better? Kind of want to make sure that we're making it look like the light's coming from that side. Cool. And because that is actually sharper than the bit that's in focus, we do need to blur it. So just because we've got fog, we just want to just make sure that we put our fastbox blur on. Let's just put this here for this tutorial. And then just blur it very subtly. Okay, so then next up is the ambient occlusion pass. So looks pretty cool, just adds extra shadows, extra details. So we just want to add a multiply. And it's quite severe, so we just want to drop that down just a little tiny bit of it, so we only want 9% on our scene. Just add a bit more depth. Then we've got transmission, so you can either use screen or linear dodge just to brighten up the leaves if you want to, or just brighten up certain parts of the leaves. So you could just bring it to. Also got the option to use color balance HLS to kind of change the color of them a little bit to blend better with your scene. You can make them more orange or more green. So if you see like what we're doing, we're just tweaking it so that's more like green, and then we want to go probably just into the oranges more because we're hitting that light, but then crank it back down to about 16%. Then we've got our volume pass. So this is just the VDB on its own with all the occlusion from the objects. Might want to blur it a little bit or just delete this section. What we can do with this is a screen blend, so we can just make it a bit more severe if we want to. But what else I like to do is, if we just turn these off for now, is I like to use a tritone. Drop that on there, and then we've got a bit more control over the colour. Kind of want it to be this sandy colour. So that's it normally, and then that's it with this in, so we just probably want it to be a bit more like that actually. Middle ground. And then we've got finally the bloom pass. So again, we'll just blend that with screen. And then the last thing we'd like to do is just to bring a bit more life to this and make it less like a render. We will create an adjustment layer. Make sure we clicked in our scene, adjustment, and we will create a curves because it's a bit easy to manipulate. Chromatic aberration. And a lumetri. So if you just put that above the curves, because that might decide. So let's just zoom in. We want to see that the chromatic aberrations definitely add in. So we've got a little bit there. Just using the quick chromatic aberration plugin that we've done a video on in the past. For HD renders, it's good to have this on 0.5, and for 4K renders, it's good to have it on 1. But just to make it a bit more severe on this example, we'll do 0.75. And we want it after the color grade, so assume that that's what's coming out camera. Otherwise, we could end up getting rid of it with a grade. So next, I think I want to add a bit more contrast because it's quite flat, and then we might have to toy with the values down here again. So we're just going to go with the contrast, probably add 50. Pull down the shadows a little. Pull down like the highlights a little bit. Maybe add a bit more contrast. Knock the exposure by 0.2. And then potentially start faffing with some of this because it seems a bit extreme. So yeah, that volume can come down a bit. It's all about subtlety. So it just adds a little bit of detail there, because we've still got the volume on the beauty pass, so this is just an extra bit. Not sure about that sky. Change the colours of it a little bit as well, so make it blend a bit better. It's not looking very good. I'm not a fan of magenta, but it kind of does work. It's definitely more bright in that corner, which is bringing in, so that's fine. So let's go back to our adjustment layer, do some more tweaks. What we can do now is duplicate our adjustment layer, get rid of everything apart from the curves, put that one underneath, and then just do a general boost. And we can highlight certain areas that we want to draw attention to, so we can make little pockets of light so they feel a bit more realistic. Feather them all, and then with this pocket of light we just push that and then push up the highlights a little bit, and it just creates depth in certain areas. And we just need to make it more subtle. Make sure you push that highlight just a little bit more, just that down a tickle, and then just knock this down to 54%. So you just got areas of poppage that you can obviously add or make your own, but you don't necessarily have to do this. It's just it just helps make an image look more 3D. I've been doing it a lot more recently. So you've got a few areas of poppage. And then the last thing to do, I think, will be to potentially add a LUT to make it feel a bit more cinematic. Could just use a Kodak LUT, but let's pick a nice one, custom. So we've added the LUT, now we just want to get rid of that magenta feel, so we can just pull some green in. Put a bit more green in. Maybe not that much. And just make it slightly warmer. If we go cool, it might not look good here. You can also jump into the secondary colour correction and pick any colours that you're not a fan of, so that weird colour. And you want to take the pink out of it, so make it more green. Blur the edge. Then Control Y, create a black solid. Double click the oval shape, invert it. Feather this slightly. Add some variation to the shape. And then blend with soft light. And to avoid it looking like Grandpa's photos, just knock it down to 25%. It just tucks in the corners. And there you have it. That is how you make a beach, and then a little bit of bog standard colour correction in After Effects to make a nice scene. So hopefully you found it useful, and I'll catch you on the next one.